For our next panel, we want to shift the discussion to the field of medicine and health. Many have argued that we are on the verge of a revolution in biomedicine, one driven by artificial intelligence. AI is accelerating drug discovery, personalizing medicine, and unlocking biological mysteries at a scale never before seen. But with this power comes profound risks. What happens when AI enables nation states, corporations, or even rogue actors to manipulate the very fabric of life? How do we balance medical breakthroughs with biosecurity threats, synthetic biology risks, and the potential for AI-driven biowarfare? There's no doubt that the intersection of AI and biomedicine will shape the future of global health, economics, and security. It can also be argued that the choices we make today will determine whether AI is a force for healing or a potential tool for harm. Fortunately, we have a panel of experts here to help us answer those questions and the many others related to this topic. Today, our great panel, entitled Biomedicine Unleashed, AI's Powers, Perils, and National Security Stakes, will be chaired by Julie Warnow. Julie is a very accomplished and award-winning health and medicine reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and I know she's going to lead a fantastic discussion. So over to you, Julie.
Hello. So I asked an artificial intelligence program to tell me how many questions I should ask for a panel this size, and so if we go over or under, we know not to blame the moderator. So, the name of this panel is Biomedicine Unleashed, AI's Power, Perils, and National Security Stakes. Pretty heavy. What I will say is that this group of people I've had the pleasure to speak with, and this is definitely the team you want with you in the zombie apocalypse. Not like hiding in the mall zombie apocalypse, like they're gonna be solving the zombie apocalypse. So we're gonna have a great time. I would love it if everyone could go around, starting with Ethan, and introduce yourselves and just briefly explain why you think you're on this panel, what kind of work you do that, that makes you relevant to the discussion today.
So thank you. I'm Ethan Jackson, Senior Director at Microsoft. I lead Microsoft Premonition, which is our biointelligence, biosecurity capabilities. I also sit in a larger division called Strategic Missions and Technologies that houses our quantum efforts. There was earlier discussion about the relevance of quantum computing and data generation and AI. It also houses our larger AI for science efforts, so trying to bring forward domain-specific models in biology, materials, and chemistry to try to help the larger biomanufacturing and biomedical R&D infrastructure to have access to those capabilities. So I guess perhaps in that landscape, maybe I'm relevant to the topic at hand, which is both benefits and potential risks of AI in this space. So thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Roberts. I'm the director of the Resilience Systems Office at ARPA-H. So we're the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, which is modeled after DARPA, which I'm guessing a number of folks in the audience are familiar with. So DARPA started internet, GPS, self-driving cars, Moderna vaccines by having this very unique investment model where we identify very large problem spaces, an innovative new type of approach that just might work if we give it the resources and try it out. And then we will pull in program managers that try to show that new ways of solving very hard problems are possible. So we're bringing that same type of model that worked for DARPA over to healthcare. So my work is at the intersection of biology, artificial intelligence, and also cybersecurity. So looking at these very interesting places where we need to look at an interdisciplinary way of both solving problems for health and making sure that we're doing it in a very responsible and thoughtful way from a security perspective.
Hi, my name is Bob Grossman. I'm a faculty member in computer science and medicine at the University of Chicago. I've spent a lot of my career building machine learning AI models over large and complex data sets. For the last 15 years, I've been focused on building these kind of models over biology, medicine, and healthcare. And for the last 2 or 3 years, we've taken what used to be a contrarian approach, which is if you have high quality, well-curated biomedical data, you can build small to mid-scale models over it. And almost always those will outperform the large frontier models because they don't have access to the data. And these kind of small models can be federated together. So that's some of the things I've done that are relevant to this panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cristina Elisa Martina. I'm a research associate professor here at Vanderbilt University in the Department of Chemistry. I work in the Mailer lab, and our lab does biotherapeutics against multiple disease. I personally work in vaccine, but in my lab we design small molecule drugs against cancer, against viral infection, against obesity or neurodegenerative disease. And I daily use, and in the lab we daily use AI tools that other people develop or that we develop to try to cure diseases.
Thanks. I'm Dave Graham from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I lead biosecurity programs at the lab, which bring together folks from the biological sciences with the national security sciences in order to address problems of interest to stakeholders, particularly developing research and development projects, programs at the plants and microbial interface area on there, and increasingly thinking about model development with teams in there. How do we make predictive models using AI/ML? How do we take advantage of the large language models that we've heard about today? And how do we think about the vulnerabilities that those models introduce in these systems?
Thank you. Okay, so obviously we have enough brains between these people to change the world. So let's see what we can get done in the next 45 minutes or so. Ethan, I'm hoping you can start us off with, and I'm asking everyone on the panel this question, before we get to all the perils. Why are we here? Like, what is so exciting about this technology that we have a room full of people who are interested in it? What are you the most excited about in terms of unleashing this in biomedicine?
So maybe I can pick 3 things instead of 1 thing. Because biology is so complicated, and I think what we're seeing is across the biological levels, really exciting advances in AI. So if I had to pick 3 things, if we start at the protein level, where proteins are the machines that make all of our bodies run, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to the ability to predict the shape of those machines in a way that we didn't expect would happen that quickly. So that's fundamentally, at that low level, a new way to understand biology. 1 level up from that, there's our DNA, which is kind of our computer code that defines these machines. You see this whole new set of models that can reason about our own sort of computer code in new ways. They can invent new genes, have the potential to accelerate, drug discovery in ways we didn't imagine. And then still, that's kind of low level. If we zoom way out as a biological system, we're this super complicated network, and our understanding of that network is encoded in tens of millions of hard-fought research publications and data artifacts, and we're seeing the capabilities of LLMs and deep research being able to go and do in minutes sometimes what we thought would be days and weeks of work. So there's super exciting advances at all of these levels. And I think they have major implications on how we will discover drugs in the future, how we will make biosecurity more secure. So just 3.
Great. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think we're at this cusp of being able to really unlock acceleration of new types of treatment, new types of therapies. We can also look at the ability to think about things like distributed manufacturing of different types of gene therapies and the like that would allow us to really force multiply our ability to help patients.
I'm going to remind you of a well-known distinction. Medicine is about the treatment of disease. Wellness is about good health, not just the absence of disease. One is regulated, one is not. So with that introduction, I have four predictions. One, what's going to be the biggest impact on healthcare, on medicine? I think that's going to be having AI for clinical trials. We're very good at doing stuff at the other end of the funnel. Drug targeting, we're very bad at figuring out which clinical trials are going to work. What's the biggest impact on wellness? I think it's personalized agents that will help with mental health and bringing out the best in everyone. I think that's a low lift and unregulated. What's the biggest impact on science? My prediction is it will be AI applied to immunology. We spend a lot of time doing this in cancer, but immunology will have tremendous medical impact. And what's the fastest gain in productivity? I think when AI is applied to hospital operations and to education, the reason being that's not regulated, and we could do that immediately.
So I will bring up personal experience. During my PhD, I designed protein computationally, but not with AI. And it took weeks and sometimes months to do this. And I think one of the big advantages and positive things of AI is that now we can do this way faster. And so it's possible with ProteinPNN, software for designing protein, to design 10,000 different sequences in question of minutes instead of days, weeks, or months that was taking 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so definitely among the positive things of AI, not only you can accelerate biomedicine or a lot of technology for humanity, but you can do it in a faster and more accurate way compared to the past.
I wanted to broaden our thinking about biomedicine a little bit to expand into the agricultural and livestock areas as well. I'm glad you all had a good lunch before this because hungry people can be angry people. And we know that historically that causes national security issues. And the scale of agriculture in the US is just vast. In Tennessee alone, we have almost 70,000 farms that take up about 41% of the land area in this state. And the scale of keeping track of the plant and animal health in that area is vast. And so being able to use everything from remote sensing data to images collected in the field by farmers to the democratized availability of information on plant pathology at your ChatGPT or large language model, and there is just transforming some of the ways that we can begin thinking about that agricultural space.
Good answers. I will say that as a health journalist, I get a lot of emails from readers who, frankly, are very afraid of this technology, right? Everything from, what are they going to do with my DNA to, what does it mean for national security? And is my doctor going to be making decisions about me anymore, or is it going to be, a robot? A lot of fears. And so I thought, since you're all quite embedded in this, that it might be helpful also to go around the room and hear what actually keeps you up at night when you think about this technology. Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, happy to jump in there. I think, there's the huge amount of benefit that we can get from taking things like the LLM type technologies, so the very large scale artificial intelligence capabilities, and then applying them to things like sequence data, in that it has the potential to unlock the potential for precision medicine, right? There's a lot of wonderful benefits that we can get from knowing the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. And as we move in that direction, as we get better and better at developing more precise therapies, knowing who they will work well for and who they won't. That's also potentially a dual-use type technology, where at the same rate that we are improving our ability to treat patients and enable better prevention, we're also potentially unlocking the ability for those who might want to go in that direction to unlock biothreats. So I think it's very important for us to think about what those parallels might be, and more importantly, how do we build in the safeguards from the outset so that as we're aggregating data to unlock things like precision medicine, we are also building in the types of safeguards that provide the ability to have perhaps indicators and warnings, perhaps the ability to track the provenance of information and data in a way that both enhances the interoperability so that we can accelerate the benefits to the country and our ability to come up with these better treatments, and simultaneously builds the security guarantees and our ability to track what perhaps is happening with the data from the ground up, so that we're doing the benefits and the security together as we're engineering these systems.
Christina, I sort of want to turn to you next because to ask the same question, because I know you've done work with vaccine development and research, and that's something that obviously everyone remembers during the COVID pandemic. You know, we were quite worried about could something, you know, affect the vaccines that everyone's taking? Could that technology be stolen for us? I wonder, you know, are these questions that you ask yourself that keep you up at night?
A little bit, yes. These are concerns that we have, and I have to say I don't consider myself an AI developer. I'm a user. I use tools that are developed by others. There are people that are more expert than me in this room probably about AI development. So seeing from outside as a biologist, there are many complicated things and not everything is very clear. It's like everyone knows how to drive a car, but not everyone knows how the engine works, for example. So it's very scary, this not knowing exactly what is going on, and I think this is one of the concerns. And one of the concerns is what can happen that I will not realize while I'm using the software. And yesterday I participated to a workshop bound to this summit where we were really discussing, Ethan was also there, where we were really discussing what are some potential risks of AI in bio. And one of the things that came up is data poisoning. And one of my questions as scientists is there something I can do to realize when data have been poisoned while I'm using the software? And the short answer is no. And actually, these make it even easier. Actually, I can sleep better knowing that I should not be worried because it's not something I can realize, but there are very smart people in the room and in the world that actively work to fight against this threat. So I'm positive towards AI. And I think the outcome from yesterday's workshop is that we can think and prevent such a threat that are scary for us biologists outside the AI world.
Then I thought I saw your face move when she was talking. Is there something that kind of struck you there about what she was saying?
Yeah, that I think there's sort of the discrete question of, you know, how does a Rosetta fold or an AlphaFold or a DNA protein model, what specific capability uplift might it give for an actor to design a biological agent that we would not want to design? So in that space, I guess, you know, I think the verdict is still out. It's biologically a complicated question to, you know, to really answer. How close are we to that? Ahead of that, there are some specific technical solutions that are already available to do things like take data that we might think that could be high risk, train AI systems on them in a way where that data doesn't leak out and those model weights don't leak out. So I think as we're figuring out what those discrete AI models mean, there's a range of technical solutions that are sort of evolving in the broader ecosystem to make management of that data and those models safer. So I guess that's one. But in my mind, the sort of, the broader cyber biosecurity question is that we have this major value proposition, which is, Jen described it, which is that, pharmaceutical industry, the entire bioeconomy should move not just its design stage, but its manufacturing, its logistics, its clinical trials into an AI-driven ecosystem. And AI will do a lot of the mundane tasks that we want it to do. It will maybe do paperwork for us. It will manage inventory systems. It will be integrated into that larger cyber fabric. And to me, cyber biosecurity means how do you keep all of that fabric defended? So that's more than the discrete question of, can this AI model create a biological agent? It looks much more like the classic cyber question. If I'm going to put my business into that framework, how do I keep it safe and secure? But now that cyber framework needs to understand biology as well.
That's a lot, yeah. Bob, what are you been thinking about in terms of your concerns?
Yeah, I normally don't show strong emotions, but I am a little concerned about this. So why? If you do any AI question about this, you get a long list of things. And they range from faster ways to do novel pathogens to attacks on the biosurveillance to healthcare. So if you look at these, I'm worried about three sort of trends, three things at the meta level. The first is the power of AI, as we heard this morning, is going to be widely diffused. So the first thing that is happening now is there are going to be more bad actors doing more bad things more quickly in this space of using AI for nefarious purposes. And they may not think through all this. In the past, when we had this, there was a lot of thought. So that's number one. Number two, this is happening at a time in which using AI for disinformation is attacking science. I'm at a university now. In the last 3 to 4 months, it's been incredibly hard for us to advance science. So at the same time, the risks are going up. We can't do the science that might protect us against this. And then number three, I think it's really easy to deceive yourselves, to think you're thinking through this and to miss what's going to happen. So I think what's going to happen, lots of people have said this. None of these are novel observations. But number three is we're going to be surprised. And that's just what's happening. We got lots of people doing lots of bad things very quickly. We're going to be surprised. And it's very hard to get people worked up now to prepare for the surprise. So that's why I'm worried.
Hard to prepare for something that's going to be a surprise, isn't it? Yeah. I just want to remind everyone that I'm sure you're all brimming with questions. Do not forget to send them to this lovely email address on the screen as we're talking so that we can get everybody taken care of. You're obviously looking at this from a slightly different angle. I can think of a million things that would keep me up at night thinking about, how this could be leveraged with our food supply, for instance. What's got you concerned?
Yeah, so certainly the food supply and the agricultural economy is much more vulnerable than many of the other biomedical areas we've talked about. But one of the big themes that's keeping me up at night, proverbially, follows on our last panel's discussion about the uncertainty of models and Christina's comments about data poisoning as well. How do we understand and reflect the uncertainty or the confidence level in model projections that are coming to us? When we look at conventional assessments and reports, there's an estimate of language. There are other things that we're used to seeing that convey likelihoods and our confidence in things. And we don't necessarily have that same set of metrics right now from large language models coming out there. When I type in a query into some of the models now, I get back a very authoritative answer. And most of that is correct, and it sounds great, and it's very carefully written. if I am not an expert in that field, how do I know the few parts that may not be correct? The parts where the model is going outside of its training and trying its best to infer answers and solutions in there that may be wrong. We all make mistakes as people, but our models do too. And how do we understand and reflect that kind of uncertainty before we act on it?
We'll be testing what my confidence is and how many questions I'm asking the panel today, right here in real time. Ethan, I wanted to ask you, we should talk about how is AI already being used right now in ways that are specific to biology, and on the flip side, how can AI actually be used itself to detect and prevent cyber threats that target hospitals and biomedical infrastructure, et cetera?
So, I'll probably refer back to the kind of protein, DNA, LLM style understanding. But how can AI improve our biosecurity? Maybe I'll dig into that a little bit, because you brought up both trustworthiness, and I remember my first occurrence at this meeting, General Nakazone was describing how the pandemic had impacts on the readiness of forces. And sitting here today, one of the things I'd like to highlight is AI that is explainable. It means that it is not that it returns probabilities, can interpret clinical and environmental samples very quickly using the entire corpus of biosignatures that we have. So that's about 10 trillion, DNA, RNA, protein signatures. So that's an example where I think today we are going very quickly from a potential risk, from a sample in hand to this very deep analysis that returns a risk score in a way that we kind of didn't think, would be available today. So clinical environments, I think, become more protected, but so do agriculture environments, which are environments we work in as well. So just one example of how AI, I think, provides a broad defensive capability and how it can be made trustworthy.
I'll have a follow-up question to that if we have time.
Okay.
And I was wondering also if maybe Bob could speak a little bit, because maybe you can explain a little bit more about your background on this, but is it actually possible to balance the need for open data sharing in biomedical research with the necessity of protecting information from threats? Is that possible?
I think the answer is yes. I think the second part of the answer is we have to do it. And the third part of the answer is it's a big shift from what I've been doing for the last 10 to 15 years. So for the last 10 to 15 years, I've been taking the pretty simple view that the best way to accelerate research in biology, medicine, and healthcare is to basically spend a lot of time creating high quality, well-curated data that's really easy for people around the world to use it and to have them make discoveries. We've done this in cancer, where the Genomic Data Commons takes that approach and is used by 80 to 90,000 researchers each month. I think the issue now is this approach to making data broadly available has a lot of, is at a cross points. So I'm going to propose that over time we move from what we've been calling in the community data commons to something new, which there is no name. I'll call them registered research commons. What this means is I think we have to move from protecting the models and doing safety around the models to fundamentally protecting the data, protecting the infrastructure, the inference infrastructure, the ETL infrastructure, and the training infrastructure. We can do that with a data commons, but it means we change the governance, so that what creates a registered research commons. Registered means you know who uses it, and you might also go to the next level, which is what's called a secure research enclave, in which you're careful what they take out. So this is a big 10-year process, but I think we have to move to that. It also fundamentally changes the economics and sustainability of AI and data, Right now, you spend your life creating nice artifacts, which different companies suck up and create AI out of. This keeps the AI in small to mid-scale models close to the data, and then they create the levers that decide how it's shared, how it's monetized. So I think this is a big transition, and thank you for asking the question.
I'm going to ask a question that I had and also sort of came in a different form from the audience, and I think maybe Jennifer will want to take it, but feel free to jump in. Basically, we've heard from multiple experts today, including Sam Altman, that we're not sure how AI works. And if we don't know how it works at this stage, how do we know we can anticipate the dangers, much less develop and implement guardrails for it? I think it's a good question from the audience.
Yeah, and I think it's spot on. We don't know exactly how they work, and what we tend to see in the field of artificial intelligence is that we'll have these large step changes in capability, where for a long time we won't be able to solve a particular problem, and then all of a sudden we will, often in a very short period of time, on the order of months or a year or two. And the question is, what are the safeguards that we should be putting in place in order to be able to think through how to plan for these places where the capabilities are going to change quickly? And I think that gets into some of what Bob was saying about being able to build in these safeguards around the data. Because what we have found, if we think about the deep learning revolution and then the newest revolution in large language models, is that the volume of data is tied to that step change in capability. So really, when we're thinking about putting in safeguards, it's important for us to consider how do we look at the places where we're pulling together very large amounts of data and build in the safeguards that can identify things like what is that provenance, make it so that we can pull the data together in a highly curated way, in taking advantage of the automation in order to make it more useful, while simultaneously adding in the types of safeguards that, say, folks have in the banking industry, where there's a lot of interoperability across institutions. We're clearly sharing lots of information about financial data. And we have the ability to track information about financial transactions as it goes around. We can track when transactions over a certain amount are shared. And we have that built into our infrastructure so that way we can start to build indicators and warnings that can be used in a very dynamic way as we learn more about when these step changes of capability will happen and what types of emerging risks are coming. Because it is not the case that we can anticipate all of the risks ahead of time, but we can anticipate that there will be risks and look at what we've done in other sectors in order to build in a very dynamic system to see how the information's being used and very dynamically and agilely adjust to that risk landscape as we learn more about it.
Now, obviously, there are some limitations to AI, right? We sort of talk about it like it could do everything. Christina, could you ground us a little bit here? Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing that AI actually can't do, that we really need some human intervention, or maybe it's not living up to the expectations that we've been told in biomedicine?
So I will start with a non-bio example. March Madness, basketball. Yeah. We made a lab bracket, and I don't know nothing about basketball, and I don't know nothing about US basketball. So I asked ChatGPT, give me the winner for each of the match. And together in my lab, other people made their own bracket, and I was almost last. Not super last, but maybe the fourth to last. So if I have to say where AI has limitation, is like March Madness will be one of the limitation. Now, going back to the bio, I would like to make 2 points. And the first one is one of the major worries in bio and AI are bioterrorism or biothreat. And one of the things I would like to point out, and I discuss often in the scientific community, is that bioterrorism is not something new that only AI can enable. This is a problem that is 20 years old or more, and people could create virus without a computer and without AI. So that is one of the concerns. This is not something that AI will enable. Maybe will accelerate the design portion, but in the bio world, for example, if I need to develop a vaccine, I can use AI to accelerate the thinking and the planning and the initial development of the vaccine, but there are still stages in which AI didn't contribute substantially like it does for protein design, protein PNN, AlphaFold. This is really where AI is now revolutionizing the field. But there are still steps in which is not. On a more particular and more close to what I'm doing, I also see limitations that are very common in AI, meaning data sets. AI is trained on data sets, and it is very good in predicting something that is close to the data set you have. In the protein field, we have proteins that are very rigid, and are the one that form mostly the data set that has been used to train AlphaFold or protein PNN, some of the software I'm using. But there are also many other proteins that are not rigid, are very flexible, that are not present in these databases. So for example, AlphaFold is not good in predicting these very flexible protein or variation of them. Same with viral protein or antibodies. These are not part of the common evolutionary scale protein that are used in the data set. And so AI, AlphaFold, has now some problems in predicting these kind of proteins. So I will say there are many advantages, but there are also still limitations that I think this could be overcome in time. And maybe in 10 years, this will not be a problem anymore. But right now, they are.
One of the things that I find so interesting about this discussion is that we're really talking about very physical things in the real world as applied, right, by AI. As important as I think what I do is, it is mostly an intellectual, right, exercise. But I mean, something like our food supply, for instance, that's quite real. And I'm just wondering, as you're listening to your colleagues here on the stage talk, what parallels you're seeing between the use of AI in biomedicine and in crops and other agricultural products.
So I think many of the same data issues translate perfectly across there. Everything from crop genetics and breeding to the lines to performance in the field. Farmers are, for good reason, very conservative, and they do not share data typically because there are economic incentives and other reasons that align nicely with the reasons that we try to protect our PHI and our other health information. And at the same time, we need that kind of training data to do better across large-scale simulations, to be able to make tools that are more useful to the community. And so we face some of the same data issues of how do we overcome the individual's quite important need to protect genetic information with the need to democratize and securely share all of that information across the development space.
We've had a question from the audience about the concern about AI being, able to sort of lower the threshold for nefarious actors launching bioagents, which could be applied, obviously, to agriculture as well as humans. Anybody want to talk about whether we think this really truly lowers the threshold, or if there's still enough obstacles to that we shouldn't be overly concerned?
I can talk a little bit about that. And certainly, the risk is there. We know that, fortunately, the number of deliberate biological incidents is low compared with other uses of weapons of mass destruction. That's a good thing. We want to keep it that way. And the barriers to those are diverse. We know that it's relatively easy to get your hand on pathogens on there, and some very virulent pathogens on there. Whether you need to design new pathogens or not is an open question. But there certainly is that open question of whether large language models that have an encyclopedic knowledge of more information than any of us could possibly have, could bring together things to overcome some of the current barriers to doing those things. And that's a systems level problem on there. It won't be a simple design of changing a few nucleic acid bases or so of an organism, but how would we begin thinking about the full systems level biosecurity?
We've had a couple questions from the audience about policy, and this one I think is a good one for the panel. They said that a new monkeypox variation is emerging quickly in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but the elimination of USAID has effectively stopped the tracking of the outbreak. Is it particularly threatening to those? It's particularly threatening to those under 30 years of age. Are you worried? I think that the question here, and I think a lot of folks in the audience have, is obviously whoever's in charge comes and goes, right? Things change quite rapidly, and so does funding. And so we're sort of wondering, how does all these, sort of gyrations in policy and funding affect all the things that we're talking about here on this panel? I know it's a tough one. Anyone want to take that?
So I will let the biologists declare their specific worry about a new Mpox variant. But, one of the, so if I maybe generalize that question to how do we have sort of longitudinally sustainable biosurveillance. One of the things that I find super exciting about AI's potential is one of the technologies we have been working on is a concept of a biological weather station, a robot that can set out in an environment, and we can put AI models in its head, and it can recognize particular species associated with animal pathogens, with human pathogens in real time. But as we did that, what we learned is it returns this huge amount of data. And there's not a bioinformatician that sits there and looks at all of this data and is like, oh, I now understand the dynamics of this in a new way. So we unlock some data, but now that understanding reaches a different bottleneck, which is, what do I do with all of it? What we're looking at now is saying, okay, what if we can put that scientific knowledge directly into the brain CPU of a robot sitting in an environment, and it can now ask that question itself. It can say, this is weird, because I could go reference all of this literature that has been studied over the last many decades, and I'll call you and tell you when I see something weird. And now what they can see, what their eyes and ears are, will vary based on the sensors that you put in them. But I think there's this very exciting inflection point where even those kind of core bioinformatics bottlenecks maybe are going away as we can forward deploy AI's ability to reach into this very large corpus of scientific knowledge.
Anyone else want to speak to this? It's a tough one.
I don't want to address the policy issue, but from a national defense point of view, we've been comfortable collecting data from around the world for years, first with satellites, then with all sorts of other technical means. As the world has changed to such a place that however it gets done, we're going to have to collect through the kind of forward deployed devices you're going to collect to other mechanisms. We're going to have to collect biosurveillance data at scale and process it at scale with AI. And, the question is really a question of, do we wait till a crisis or do we get in front of the crisis with that? And that's where the policy gets in. But from a technology viewpoint, we need global surveillance to keep crops safe, to keep health safe, because people move in airplanes in a few hours. There is no such thing as keep my community safe. There's no way to have a fence around your community when it comes to biological health, other kinds of issues.
So are you saying, when a number of people here are asking, essentially, how do we keep up, right? This idea that there's this global race and that we're going to fall behind. Are you saying that the way to keep up is actually collaboration across nations, and that it's not really possible to sort of do this on our own? Or do you think that there is a sort of argument to be made in the other direction?
I mean, lots of people have talked about this over a lot of years. The more collaborative data you get from around the world in this space, the better. There are barriers to that. There are lots of challenges. You have to understand how good the data is. But, years ago, we sent satellites up so that we could surveil the world to keep the U.S. safe. We're going to have to think of a wide range of ways we can keep the U.S. safe as all sorts of emerging threats come out.
And this is sort of a follow-on to that. Someone was asking, well, how do we preserve Americans' biological data if a lot of tech runs through other states? Is that possible in this new world?
Yeah, I think that gets into a variety of different data management technologies, because you could imagine really investing in privacy-preserving variance on federated learning, right? So you could imagine us investing in areas where we could actually look at cases inside the United States, where each state has different privacy laws, and yet we want to share information about medical records or other aspects of healthcare, and the legal framework's different. So being able to have federated approaches where the data stays in the locality where the people who produce that data live, and we have a way of enabling our computational approaches and our learning and models to be able to extract insights from each of those data storage locations, right? So you could imagine building in the differential privacy that allows us to get the community and population insights that we need in order to be able to keep people healthy, and also ensuring that the information about any one person is protected.
I should say, just building on what she said, when I proposed a registered research enclave, it was one way to implement that. ARPA-H is doing work in what's called the Biomedical Data Fabric. I think we really do have to go to, a lot of data is not shared, and that data that's not shared within the firewalls of medical centers and hospitals could contribute to health. So rather than trying to centralize all that and create a greater attack surface, following up on ways like that to leverage the data we have, better protect the data we have, and be more clever in terms of federating results rather than centralizing results, I think is important.
That, if you don't mind, I did want to ask a follow-up question about sort of how this data, all of these applications could really be applied sort of from lab to bedside. So I'm thinking about all the war-weary hospital workers that I talk to, trying to implement this inside a contracting workforce of clinicians. Any thoughts on sort of how, if we get out of the heady space, how is this really going to work when you get down to, say, a clinician level and try to get them on board with this technology?
Yeah, I think that's where the productivity enhancing aspects really come in, right? Because if we think about something like, say, clinical trials, we would like clinical trials to be able to run close to where everyone lives, and yet that doesn't happen because of the amount of human curation and expert involvement that's needed in taking samples from patients and also making sure that we have the quality that we need for health research. If we take advantage of the revolution in large language models, we can imagine really reducing the amount of workload that's needed in order to be able to collect that evidence and form the foundation for better treatments, better precision medicine, all of that, by reducing the amount of work people need to do that curation.
I was sort of feeling hopeful about that idea until I heard Sam Altman today say that he doesn't sleep and works all the time. I was like, he's the one who has the AI. So I hope you're right. The clock's telling me that we only have about 1.5 minutes left. I did want to take a minute to ask if anyone on the panel had any questions they wanted to ask of another person on the panel in this forum, since you probably don't all get to be in the same room together very often. Don't raise your hands at once.
I don't know, so many questions. I was telling Jen, I'm just so excited that, there's a moonshot in health. So I guess maybe a general question, Jen, around sort of how do you see that unfolding broadly as AI is moving, so fast?
Yeah, great question. I think at ARPA-H, we're very interested in being able to partner with the industry as we're making all kinds of progress in artificial intelligence. And we're also looking for these areas where we can build capabilities that cross multiple organizations and raise all ships. So where are the places where we can have this efficiency enhancing, say, around clinical trials or around ways to accelerate the discovery of new treatments, better security that really help people across the ecosystem, regardless of whether it's a hospital center, a large company, small businesses, universities, and so forth. So happy to talk with anyone who has ideas on that.
Well, we'll have to wrap it up, but I hope you all get to discuss more after we leave. And please, a round of applause for our amazing panel.